A black SUV with HOA decals rolled into my driveway like it owned the place. The man inside said one word that made my stomach drop: inspection. I was standing near the garage when the SUV turned off the street and crossed the curb cut like it had every right to be there. No pause, no hesitation. The tires crunched over the edge of my driveway and stopped 10 feet from my front steps. The vehicle looked official: clean decals, reflective striping, a roof-mounted amber bar that flashed once before going dark. It wasn't a police car, but it was designed to feel close enough. The driver stepped out, clipboard tucked under his arm, phone already recording. He wore a black polo with the HOA name stitched on the chest. Before he even reached me, he angled his body to block my driveway exit, planting himself between my car and the street. That physical positioning was the first thing that felt wrong. He said he was HOA patrol and needed to inspect the property for compliance. No appointment, no notice, just a statement like refusal wasn't an option. I told him calmly that this was a private driveway and asked him to leave. Instead of responding, he lifted his phone higher and slowly panned it across my house, lingering on the driveway, the garage door, the side yard. That was the second visual moment that mattered: him recording me while standing on my property. I took a step back, pulled out my own phone, and started recording too. I didn't argue, I didn't raise my voice. I asked one simple question: what authority do you have to be here? He didn't answer directly. He said, "We're authorized by the HOA," and tapped the decal on his shirt like it settled the matter. Then he turned and walked back to the SUV without another word, leaving fresh tire marks where he'd stopped short. As he drove off, I zoomed in on the rear plate and caught it clearly before he turned the corner. That night, I mounted a small camera inside my front window, angled straight down the driveway. I didn't add signs, I didn't block access. I just made sure the entire approach, from curb to front door, was visible. If he came back, I wanted time, motion, and position captured cleanly. 2 nights later, he did. This time, the SUV crept in after sunset with its headlights off, only the parking lights glowing. It stopped in the exact same spot as before, almost like he was testing consistency. He got out, walked halfway up the driveway, and taped a warning notice directly onto my garage door. The adhesive peeled paint when he pressed it down. That physical act, touching my property again, was unmistakable on camera. He didn't knock, he didn't announce himself. He just filmed the notice, stepped back, and drove away. I watched the footage twice before going outside. The notice cited an ordinance number that didn't match anything in our community rules. The formatting was off too: wrong font, outdated logo, and a footer that listed an enforcement division I'd never heard of. Still, to anyone glancing at it, it looked official enough to cause panic. The next morning, I peeled it off and photographed the residue left behind. Then I checked my camera logs. The timestamps lined up perfectly with the SUV's arrival and departure. Same vehicle, same plate, same angle blocking the driveway. I didn't contact the HOA, I didn't post online. I waited. 3 days later, the escalation jumped. I came out to my car and found a bright orange tow warning tucked under the wiper, flapping slightly in the breeze. No tow truck in sight. The threat was clear. The paper warned that continued non-compliance may result in immediate vehicle removal. The phrasing implied authority they didn't actually have. The visual impact was intentional. Anyone seeing that would think action was imminent. As I stood there reading it, the SUV rolled past the end of the driveway without stopping, slow enough that I could see the driver glance over. That drive-by was deliberate, a pressure tactic. I filmed the warning in place before removing it, making sure the camera caught the driveway context, the car's position, and the street sign proving the vehicle was fully on my private parcel. Later that evening, an email hit my inbox. Attached was a violation summary with an HOA logo that looked close but not exact. The color was slightly off. The registration mark was missing. The sender's domain wasn't the official HOA domain I'd seen on past newsletters. At first glance, it felt like they'd won. The email included a compliance deadline and warned of next steps. It was designed to push me into reacting. But standing there in my driveway, camera still recording as another car passed, I realized something important. Every move they'd made was physical, visual, and documented on my terms. And if they were really authorized, why did none of it line up? So the question became simple. Were they enforcing rules or impersonating authority? And if they were impersonating, how far would they go before someone forced them to prove it?
By the end of that week, the driveway stopped feeling like part of my home and started feeling like a stage. Early one morning, I was backing my car out when I noticed fresh chalk marks near the curb, thin white lines angled toward my tires. They weren't city markings, too sloppy, too recent. I pulled forward again and stepped out to look closer. The marks ended exactly where the HOA patrol SUV usually stopped. Whoever did it had stood there, measuring position, planning leverage. I filmed the marks before brushing them away with my shoe. Then I adjusted the camera angle slightly lower so it caught the full length of the driveway and the street sign at the corner. If someone claimed jurisdiction again, I wanted zero ambiguity about where public space ended and private property began. That same afternoon, the SUV returned. This time, it didn't pull all the way in. It stopped half on, half off the driveway, tires straddling the curb cut. The amber light flicked on and stayed on, casting slow pulses across my garage door. The driver didn't get out right away. He sat there, engine idling, watching the house. I stepped outside, phone already recording. As soon as he saw me, he opened his door and stood up, deliberately positioning himself so the SUV still blocked my exit path. That was visual action number one, physical obstruction, clear as day. He said they'd received confirmation that my driveway was subject to HOA oversight. I didn't argue. I asked him to show me the document. Instead, he pointed at the SUV, at the lights, at the clipboard, symbols instead of proof. Then he did something subtle but critical. He walked up the driveway again and placed a small orange cone near my garage, just inside the property line. No warning, no explanation. Just set it down and stepped back to film it. That cone mattered. It wasn't damage, it wasn't force, but it was a physical marker, an attempt to assert control. I picked it up, turned it over so the camera could see there were no markings, no asset tag, nothing official, and placed it back at the edge of the street. I didn't throw it. I didn't keep it. I returned it to neutral ground. The entire exchange was silent on my end.
He didn't like that. He said the word non-compliance and went back to his SUV. As he drove off, the amber light stayed on the entire way down the street, a rolling threat meant for neighbors to see. That night, I got another email. This one escalated the tone, shorter deadline, firmer language. It referenced field observations and patrol documentation. Still the wrong logo, still the wrong ordinance, still no named officer, no license number, no board resolution. I didn't respond. Instead, I did something passive and very visible. The next day, I parked my car at the exact center of my driveway, well within my property boundaries, perfectly aligned. I made no changes to landscaping, no barriers, just normal use. Then I let the cameras run. The SUV came back just after dusk. It slowed, stopped, and this time a second person got out, a woman with a tablet. They circled the driveway together, pointing, filming, gesturing. One of them stepped into the street to photograph the angle of my parked car. The other walked up to the garage again and held the tablet inches from the door, scanning as if it might read something invisible. Two different people, two different devices, same behavior. They left without placing anything, but 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A new email. Subject line, final notice before enforcement. That was the moment the HOA seemed to win. The email claimed the patrol had authority under an existing service arrangement and set a firm compliance date. It warned of consequences, but still stopped short of naming them clearly. Enough to scare, not enough to verify. Anyone else might have caved right there. I didn't, because by then I had something better than arguments. I had patterns. Same SUV, same stopping distance, same blocking behavior, same after-dark timing, same incorrect ordinance, same mismatched branding, same lack of credentials, and most importantly, clear footage of them repeatedly entering private property without verified authority. So I made one more quiet move. I repositioned a second camera, not hidden, not deceptive, inside the garage window, angled outward. From there, it captured the driveway, the cone placement area, and the exact spot where notices had been taped before. 2 cameras, overlapping fields of view, synchronized timestamps. If you're watching this story and you want to see how situations like this actually end, not with yelling, not with drama, but with proof, make sure you're subscribed, because what happens next is where most people make mistakes and where this case took a very different turn. 2 days later, the patrol returned earlier than usual, broad daylight. They pulled in fast this time, no hesitation, as if they were done waiting. The driver stepped out holding a printed packet. He walked straight toward my front door, but he never made it. Halfway up the driveway, he stopped, looked around, and glanced back at the SUV. Something had changed. The confidence was gone. He turned slightly, shielding the papers from the camera he suddenly remembered existed. He adjusted his stance, stepped back toward the vehicle, and made a call. From my window, watching silently, I realized something critical. They were no longer acting like people who knew they had authority. They were acting like people who were about to be asked to prove it. And the next move wouldn't come from them. It would come from the records they couldn't produce. So the real question wasn't whether they'd come back again. It was what would happen the moment someone official asked them who authorized the patrol in the first place. The next morning, the street felt different. I noticed it before I even checked the cameras. The air was quiet, but not calm, like something was being staged just out of sight. I stepped outside with my phone in hand and saw fresh tire impressions on the edge of the driveway, overlapping yesterday's marks. Whoever had been there hadn't stayed long, but they'd stopped just long enough to line things up again. I didn't erase anything this time. I left the marks exactly where they were. Around noon, a different vehicle appeared. Same decals, same color scheme, but this one had a temporary tag taped inside the rear window. It slowed as it approached, then stopped short of the driveway. The driver leaned forward, squinting at the house, then at the cameras, both of them clearly visible now. That hesitation was visual action number 1. Authority doesn't hesitate like that. The passenger door opened, and a man stepped out holding a folder thick enough to look impressive from a distance. He didn't walk up right away. Instead, he paced along the curb, pointing toward my driveway while speaking quietly to the driver. They were rehearsing something. I zoomed in and kept filming. Finally, he crossed the curb cut and took exactly 3 steps onto the driveway before stopping. He looked up at the camera in the window, then down at the ground, measuring where he stood. He backed up 1 step, just enough to say he was technically off the property, and raised his voice so it would carry. He announced that the HOA had confirmed jurisdiction and that he was there to deliver notice. He didn't approach the door. He didn't place anything on the property. Instead, he set the folder on the hood of the SUV and photographed it sitting there, like that counted as service. That was visual action number 2, the performance of enforcement without actually crossing the line. I stayed inside. No response, no confrontation. After a few minutes, he slid a single page out of the folder and carefully placed it on the windshield of their own SUV. Then he photographed that, too. The implication was obvious. They were creating the appearance of an official process without doing the thing that would expose them. When they left, I reviewed the footage. The page he photographed wasn't visible clearly, but the header format looked different again. 3rd variation, 3rd mismatch.
An hour later, the email arrived. This one claimed personal delivery attempted. It referenced the same date and time as the curbside performance. It included photos, cropped tight, no context, designed to suggest proximity that never actually happened.
That was the moment everything clicked. They weren't enforcing. They were simulating enforcement. And simulations leave trails. So I made my move, not by responding to them, but by widening the frame. That afternoon, I walked the driveway with my phone and filmed a slow, uninterrupted shot from the garage door to the street sign, narrating nothing, just capturing space and boundaries. I filmed the curb cut, the sidewalk, the asphalt. I filmed the exact spot where the SUV always stopped. Then I filmed the house number on the mailbox and the parcel marker embedded near the edge of the lawn. No commentary, just facts in motion. Then I did something most people overlook. I waited. 2 days passed with nothing. No SUV, no emails, no warnings. On the third day, the HOA itself finally reached out, but not the way you'd expect. A generic community newsletter landed in my inbox, announcing an upcoming board meeting and reminding residents that all enforcement actions are conducted through authorized vendors only. The wording was subtle, but it was new. That sentence hadn't been there before. That was my confirmation that someone else was asking questions. That evening, the SUV came back. Same one as before, same stopping distance, but this time the amber light never turned on. The driver stayed inside, the engine idled, then shut off. 30 seconds passed, a minute, 2. Finally, the driver got out, alone, and stood next to the vehicle without stepping forward. He looked at the cameras, then down at his phone, then back at the house. He didn't hold a clipboard, he didn't film. Instead, he took a photo of the street sign. That single action told me everything.
He wasn't documenting me anymore. He was documenting location, trying to anchor jurisdiction after the fact. He made a call, paced once, then got back into the SUV and left without another word. That night, I received one last email from the patrol address. Short, careful, non-threatening. It said, enforcement was paused pending internal review. Paused. Not canceled, not justified, paused. Which meant the burden had shifted. From that point on, I stopped recording daily and started organizing. I synced camera timestamps with email headers. I matched vehicle appearances to message language. I lined up cone placement, notice taping, and obstruction moments with the exact claims they later made in writing. Every physical act contradicted a written assertion. Every video frame told a cleaner story than their documents ever could. 3 days later, a certified envelope arrived, not from the patrol, but from the HOA itself. Inside was a single-page notice stating that all prior actions related to my property were withdrawn effective immediately, and that no further enforcement would occur without direct board authorization. No apology, no explanation, just silence where pressure used to be. But here's the part that mattered most. Attached was a revised policy memo announcing new verification requirements for patrol activity, uniform standards, vendor registration, and mandatory display of authorization when entering private property. They didn't admit fault, they corrected behavior, which told me everything I needed to know. Because when fake authority collapses, it doesn't do so loudly. It just disappears, leaving behind proof that it was never real to begin with. And if you're wondering how close this came to going very differently, or what finally forced the HOA to step in officially, that's where the next chapter begins. The silence didn't last. 2 mornings after the withdrawal notice, I noticed something new on the driveway. Fresh, uneven footprints in the dust near the garage. Not tire marks this time, shoes. Someone had walked up, stopped, and turned around. I checked the cameras. At 6:12 a.m., just after sunrise, the same SUV had rolled up slowly, parked on the street,
and a single person got out. He didn't step fully onto the driveway. Instead, he leaned forward from the curb, stretching his arm just far enough to place something on the ground. A laminated card slid into view, skidding a few inches before stopping right at the edge of my property line. Then he stepped back, snapped a photo, and left. The card stayed there for hours. I let it. When I finally walked out to retrieve it, I filmed the approach in one continuous shot. The card claimed to be a notice of monitoring suspension, stamped with a logo that looked closer to the real HOA branding than before, but still not exact. The color gradient was off, the font weight was wrong, and there was no signature, only a typed name with no title. That was visual action number 1, a document physically placed but carefully kept off property, like someone afraid of crossing an invisible line. I turned the card over, blank. No case number, no reference code, nothing to tie it to any official system. That afternoon, neighbors started asking questions. One waved me over while I was taking trash bins back in. She pointed down the street and said she'd seen the SUV earlier that week, slowly circling, stopping, and leaving cones near other driveways, but only briefly. Another neighbor mentioned a patrol guy who asked where the HOA office was, then left when told to contact the board. The pattern was expanding. That evening, the HOA sent a community-wide email, short, carefully worded. It stated that any vehicle claiming enforcement authority must be pre-approved and listed on the association website. No mention of my address, no reference to complaints, just a rule that hadn't existed before. That was the second visual moment, policy shifting in real time, reacting to something they didn't want to name. The next day, the SUV came back, but not alone. A white sedan followed it, parking a few houses down. A man stepped out with a tablet and stood on the sidewalk, clearly filming the patrol vehicle itself. That caught my attention. This wasn't enforcement behavior. This was oversight. The patrol driver stayed in his seat this time. No cones, no notices, no lights, just waiting. The man with the tablet walked up to the SUV, leaned in through the open window, and spoke for nearly a minute. He pointed at the decals, he pointed at the light bar, he pointed down the street toward my driveway, but never at my house directly. Then he stepped back, snapped a photo, and left. I replayed the footage frame by frame. The man with the tablet wore a plain button-down shirt, no branding, but when he turned slightly, I caught a badge clip at his belt. Not law enforcement, but administrative, the kind used by association managers or compliance officers. That was when it became clear the HOA was auditing the patrol. Quietly.
2 days later, a second certified envelope arrived. Inside were meeting minutes from an emergency session I hadn't known about. No names mentioned, but the language was precise. It referenced unauthorized representation, risk exposure, and improper use of association marks. It also included a resolution, immediate termination of any mobile enforcement activities not explicitly approved by board vote. No drama, no accusations, just facts. But there was one last attempt. That evening, as the sun dropped low, the SUV made one final pass. No stopping, no parking, just a slow roll past the house, windows up, decals still on display. As it passed, the driver lifted his phone and filmed my driveway from the street. I stepped outside and stood still, hands visible, phone down. I didn't react, I didn't wave. I just let the cameras capture the moment. That was the final visual action. Surveillance without engagement, authority reduced to observation. The next morning, the HOA website updated. The HOA patrol vendor listing was gone, replaced by a notice explaining that no mobile enforcement units are currently in operation. That was the end of it. No more emails, no more visits, no more warnings. Just a driveway that went back to being a driveway. If you're watching this and thinking, I would have argued, I would have confronted, I would have demanded answers, here's the truth. None of that would have mattered.
What mattered was letting unauthorized actions reveal themselves, on camera, in motion, over time. And if you want to hear how the HOA reacted internally once the board realized what had been happening, or how this changed enforcement across the entire community, make sure you're subscribed, because the final stretch of this story isn't about the patrol at all. It's about what happens when proof forces an organization to protect itself. The question isn't whether the fake authority disappeared, it's who else they tried this on and how close it came to working before someone finally pressed record. The board meeting wasn't announced publicly, but the effects showed up everywhere. The first sign was the street itself. The temporary cones that had appeared near a few driveways earlier in the week were gone. The chalk marks vanished. Even the patrol SUV decals, once so bold, were missing the next time I saw the vehicle parked behind a strip mall a few miles away. Same shape, same light bar, blank sides. But the story didn't end with disappearance. It shifted into accountability. 3 days after the website update, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. The message was calm, professional, and careful. The caller identified himself as a property manager retained by the HOA and asked to verify a few observations related to enforcement activity near my address. I didn't call back right away. Instead, I reviewed the footage one more time, every visit, every stop, every placement of cones and notices. I clipped short segments showing physical actions only, blocking the driveway, taping notices, placing markers, filming from inside the property line. No commentary, no accusations, just motion and timestamps. Then I returned the call. The manager asked neutral questions. Had I seen a patrol vehicle? Had any items been placed on my property? Had anyone represented themselves as authorized enforcement? I answered simply and offered to share video evidence if needed. There was a pause on the line, just long enough to tell me that offer mattered. He said yes. I sent a secure link with read-only access, no edits, no overlays, raw clips. An hour later, I watched from my window as a different car pulled up, this time a standard sedan with no markings. 2 people stepped out, both holding phones, both filming the driveway from the sidewalk. They didn't cross the curb, they didn't approach the house. They documented space, boundaries, and signage. Visual action number 1, oversight replacing enforcement. They stayed less than 5 minutes. That evening, another email arrived, this one directly from the HOA office. It acknowledged receipt of materials and confirmed that the patrol activity in question had not been authorized by a board vote, contract, or vendor agreement. The language was tight, legal, defensive. But it ended with something new, a request. They asked whether I had experienced any restriction of access or any implied enforcement action during the patrol's visits. Implied. That word mattered. I replied once, briefly. I referenced the blocked driveway, the tow warning, and the placement of items on my property, all documented by time and footage, no emotions, no demands. The next morning, a notice went up at the community entrance. I saw it while driving out. Large font, clear language. It stated that only named vendors listed on the HOA website were authorized to conduct enforcement, and that residents should report any vehicle claiming authority without proper identification. That was visual action number 2, public correction. Neighbors started talking. One mentioned a warning she'd received weeks earlier that never went anywhere. Another said a patrol had filmed his driveway once and then vanished. Pattern widened again, but now the direction was reversed. Stories flowing toward the HOA, not away from it. Late that afternoon, the property manager called again. He didn't ask questions this time. He explained. The patrol company had pitched itself as a turnkey solution. Branding, vehicles, compliance, presence. They'd operated in other communities, skirting the edge of authority without crossing it openly. In this case, they'd gone too far, too visible, too documented. The HOA had terminated all contact and issued a cease notice regarding use of its name and marks. Then he said something that stuck with me. We wouldn't have seen it without the video. That night, the patrol SUV made one last appearance, but not on my street. A neighbor down the block sent me a clip. The vehicle slowed near the entrance sign, paused, then drove away without turning in. No lights, no stop, just a look and go. The next day, the HOA website added a new page, Enforcement Transparency. It listed vendors, contact numbers, and procedures. It explained what patrols could and could not do. It even included a note encouraging residents to document interactions for clarity. That page didn't exist before this. If you're following this story and wondering why this matters beyond one driveway, here's the reason. Unauthorized authority thrives on silence. It relies on people assuming someone else checked the paperwork. If you want to see how this finally closed, how the HOA protected itself, how the patrol vanished completely, and what changed community-wide because someone let the cameras roll, make sure you're subscribed. The final chapter isn't about conflict, it's about consequences. A week later, a final certified letter arrived. It confirmed that no violations existed on my property, that no enforcement actions were pending, and that any prior notices should be considered void. It also stated that the association had implemented new controls to prevent unauthorized representation in the future. No apology, still, but something better, a system that wouldn't let it happen again. Standing in my driveway that evening, watching cars pass without slowing, I realized the threat had never been about rules or compliance. It had been about who gets believed when authority is questioned. And in the end, belief followed the proof. The only question left was how many other communities never saw it because no one thought to press record.
By the time the final letter arrived, the driveway felt ordinary again, and that's how I knew it was over. No slow rolls, no lights, no phones raised from behind tinted glass. Just cars passing like they always had before someone decided to test how far borrowed authority could go. Still, I kept the cameras running, not out of fear, out of habit. When something like this happens, you don't stop documenting just because the noise fades. The certified letter confirmed what the earlier notice hinted at. The HOA had formally closed the issue. No violations, no pending actions, all prior notices void. It was signed by the board president and countersigned by the management company. 2 names, 2 titles, real ones. But what mattered wasn't what the letter said, it was what happened after. That same week, the HOA posted new signage at the community entrance. Not warning signs, informational ones. Clear language explaining who could conduct enforcement, how to verify authorization, and where to report concerns. I watched maintenance workers bolt the sign into place, step back, check alignment, and take photos for records. Visual action number 1, transparency made physical. A few days later, a community meeting was held. I didn't attend, but a neighbor did and told me what happened. The board didn't mention my address. They didn't mention the patrol by name. Instead, they walked through a new protocol step by step, explaining why it existed and how it would be enforced. No blame, no drama, just process. That told me the HOA wasn't trying to save face anymore. They were trying to reduce risk. Then something unexpected happened. A different HOA, one from a nearby neighborhood, reached out. A resident there had heard about what happened and asked how I documented everything. I didn't give advice, I didn't coach, I just explained what I did. Cameras visible, timestamps intact, no confrontation, no edits. A week later, I saw a familiar SUV parked outside a gas station on the edge of town. Same body, same light bar, no decals, no markings at all. Just a vehicle now indistinguishable from any other. The authority had evaporated. Looking back, the most important moments weren't the letters or the emails. They were the small physical acts that couldn't be explained away. Blocking a driveway, placing a cone, taping a notice, filming from inside a property line.
Each one seemed minor on its own. Together, they formed a pattern no memo could erase. That's the part people miss. Unauthorized enforcement doesn't fail because someone argues harder. It fails because reality keeps a record. If you're watching this and thinking, what if they had pushed one step further? That's exactly why this ended when it did. The trap wasn't aggressive, it wasn't clever. It was passive, lawful, and unavoidable. Every action they took created evidence they couldn't later reconcile with their claims. And if you want more real-world HOA stories like this, where pressure meets proof and the outcome stays monetization safe, make sure you're subscribed. These cases don't end with shouting matches. They end with quiet corrections that ripple outward. In the weeks that followed, the community felt steadier. Enforcement notices, when they appeared, were mailed properly. Patrol vehicles, when used, were listed online with vendor IDs. Residents stopped whispering about that SUV and started asking the HOA questions directly. That shift mattered, because authority only works when it's accountable. The driveway never changed, the house never changed, the rules didn't even change much. What changed was visibility, who was watching whom and how clearly. One evening, as I took out the trash, I noticed something simple but telling. A neighbor parked partly over his own driveway line, shrugged and adjusted it himself, without fear of a sudden warning or a phone shoved in his face. Normal behavior restored. That's when I finally powered down one of the cameras, not because I forgot, but because I didn't need it anymore. The lesson here isn't about HOAs being good or bad. It's about what happens when symbols of authority move faster than authorization itself. Vehicles, uniforms, logos, they're persuasive until someone asks for the one thing that can't be faked long-term: proof. And proof doesn't argue, it just exists. If you've ever felt pressured by someone claiming power they couldn't clearly show, remember this story. Stay calm, stay visible, let actions speak louder than claims. Because when the record is clear, even the loudest authority has nowhere to stand. And sometimes, the biggest mistake isn't showing up uninvited, it's doing it on camera.